We're kicking off the West Bank part of the Gary's tour here at Moscas. Everybody knows the name of Moscas, Carlos Marcello's favorite restaurant. The story of Moscas, it started out life called under the name of the Willswood Tavern, owned by the Marcellos. Some people say Carlos, but there's some info to kind of suggest that it was actually bought by his dad, Joe. At the time, there was nothing out here. It was just this restaurant. There might have been, a few houses here and there, maybe a general store here and there, but mainly it was just a deserted, swampy, wooded area that if anybody followed Marcello and his buddies out here, they'd be able to spot it. And they, hey, what are you doing out here? So, what happened was Provino and Lisa Mosca. Provino had a successful Italian restaurant up in Chicago. The rumor is that he was a cook for Al Capone at one point. The Mosca family denies that. But their daughter ended up marrying an oysterman from this area. So they decided to move down here. Provino got a job as a cook here at Willswood Tavern, and the story goes that Carlos liked his cooking so much that he gave him the place to call his own. Now, when I say gave him, it was more like lent them. Because even though the Mosca family does what they want with this, as I understand it, Marcellos and maybe some others still own this property. 4 or 5 years ago, I was told that the Mosca family decided they were going to put the place up for sale and get out of the business. Some unnamed folks told them, no, that's not going to happen. I've heard that from several sources. So, anyways, when it came down here, he gave Provino the place to run. In 1946, it was renamed Moscas. Now, there's at least 2 guys who were last seen at Moscas here. The first guy was a New York guy, Constantino Masoto. He murdered his sister in upstate New York and hauled ass down to here to hide out from his family. His family, which they were part of the D'Aquila family up in New York, they found out where he was. They contacted Sam Carollo and asked him to take care of it. The story is that Masoto, who was running a stall in the French Market, he was associated with a guy named Sal Vitale and another guy, Tommy Siracusa. That day that he disappeared, it was in August of 1943. The day he disappeared, he had lunch out here at Mosca with Siracusa and Vitale. When he got home, he told his wife, hey, I got to go back out there to meet those guys, which she thought was a little strange since they had lunch out here. Masoto, who was going under the name of Gene Mano at the time when he was here hiding out, he never came back home. Siracusa and Vitale were picked up and questioned, but there was no evidence against them to hold them or charge them with anything. Word is Carlos Marcello did the actual deed on Masoto, and this was August. In November of 1943, a couple of miles from this spot, they found Masoto's body in a shallow grave. A couple of kids out rabbit hunting, duck hunting. They ran across his grave. He had been covered in lime, shallow grave, but no, if I remember correctly, it looked like he had been at his skull bashed in. Now, a couple of months later, Tommy Siracusa, there was a witness statement that said several of the guys, Carlos Marcello, Zip Gepento, several other New Orleans family members were in here. This would be February of 1944. They were in here. Tommy Siracusa came in And Tommy Syracuse, according to the witness statement, looked very surprised and then very concerned. The guys at the table with Marcello, they got up, they took Syracuse in the back, and a few moments later, they heard a lot of pots and pans being thrown around, some guys screaming and yelling, and when one of the wives that was cooking in the back came out and the door opened, this witness stated that she saw Tommy Syracuse in a chair, and it looked like Carlos was pistol whipping him. Tommy Syracuse wasn't seen after that day. His skeletal remains were found in April of '44 on a road quite a ways from here called Downman Road. A farmer driving by saw some remains that had looked like they'd been dragged from, in the brush out to the road. And the only way Tommy was identified, his wife identified his personal effects. So, the stories go, if you listen to John Davis, there was, legions of guys that walked into this place and never walked out. But that's the only two I can find information on as far as that happening. If you look over at this house over here, story goes that when Carlos gave the Willswood Tavern to the Moscas, he also built them this house to live in. So they were right there. I guess, maybe anytime Carlos decided he wanted some food, he could just come up here, hey, give me some food. I've eaten here one time. The food is very good. I've always heard stories about the large portions. That might have been way back in the day. The portions aren't so large now, but it was very good. Cash only. Imagine that. You make reservations. So Churchill Farms. Mosca's butts up against the northern end of Churchill Farms. The highway kind of cut, is the boundary. But Churchill Farms was originally about 6,600 acres that Carlos bought at a very good price, as I understand it. What Carlos did is he got, there had been talk about a highway going through here, right through this general area. So Carlos offered the city free land, but I think it was about 200 acres to build the Superdome. And you might say, well, 200 acres for free, wow, that's generous. It wasn't really generous because, with that highway going through here, Carlos, was foreseeing the place being built up, and he could sell the rest of the land for, some pretty good cheddar. So it ended up not happening, and but throughout the years, Carlos and the family, they have sold off little sections here and there. And as I understand it, they also rent out parts of Churchill Farms to the Army Corps of Engineers who pay them to do improvements. They benefit from the improvements, and then, then they sell the land. So they're still making some pretty good money off of Churchill Farms. Now, there were, if you've seen on the Crescent City page, I've posted a lot of pictures of the buildings, the few buildings that were there. Carlos's office. There's goat pens. It looks like maybe there was like a storage shed or maybe a garage or something like that. Anybody who wants to see pictures, they can go on the Crescent City page and just type in Churchill Farms in the search, and they'll see some pictures. Unfortunately, I've been told that some of the structures are still in existence, but unfortunately I haven't pinpointed exactly where those structures would be. A lot of sections, like I said, have been sold off, so there's like some subdivisions now that were built in old Churchill Farm areas. Some amusement stuff. There's a go-kart track in one area. Stuff like that. So hopefully one day I'll get to pinpoint those and get to hopefully see them up close. But yeah, Churchill Farms, way back there, and just went for acres. And what Carlos did is when he thought the highway and the Superdome might be built there, he got the local parishes and he got the state to pay for building these huge pumping stations that would pump out the swamp water to reclaim the land and, you know, have it as sellable land. Life did a story on that also, and I've got some of the Life pictures up on the Crescent City page. These pumping stations were huge. They were huge, and I'm sure in 1970s, late 60s, 70s dollars, they must have cost a fortune back then too, you know. And there were several of them. I can't remember offhand exactly how many, but there were several located all around Churchill Farms, draining it out. And the only person that ever benefited from it was Carlos. At the time, a lot of people were questioning, hey, why the hell is this going on? But Carlos, he even managed to pay minimal tax on Churchill Farms. I forget exactly how he finagled it, but he was paying something like $700 a year on property taxes for 6,600 acres of, you know, swampland. I mean, worth a lot more than that. And he managed to get the parish to put a road into his office for him too. Put a road in and put a gate in for him. So Carlos was a smart dude.
What about the goats?
Oh, the goats, yeah. Carlos, apparently he had a real taste for barbecued goat. I've heard from several sources that he, you know, whenever he threw parties or barbecues, anything like that, goat was on the menu. And that's one of the pictures you can see at Churchill Farms is, you know, the goat pens. And there's a guy I haven't been able to identify, but you can see him bringing the goats out, and, you know, they're just taking the goats wherever. But yeah, it was. I just thought that was kind of funny, you know. But his family was from, I believe it was Ragusa, Sicily. However, they moved to Tunis to find work. At the time, Tunis was a French colony. His dad, Joe, came over here after his wife, Louisa, got well, Louisa, or Louise as she's known here, after she got pregnant. He came here to find work and set up shop and everything. She gave birth to Carlos over in Tunis. When they got here to New Orleans, Carlos was 10 months old. So he was brought here as a child. Now, the family, of course, the other children, the 6 brothers and the 2 sisters, they were born here in America. So there was no problem with them. Luis and Joe, they naturalized themselves, but for some reason, Carlos was never naturalized. I haven't seen a good explanation of why not. And that's, of course, that's why he went through all the deportation woes. And the only reason they deported him to Guatemala in '62 is because in '51, after the Kefauver hearings, he was kind of tagged as, you know, an illegal alien and needed to be deported. So from '51, '52, that's when his deportation woes started. And Carlos figured, okay, if the day ever does come to where I get deported, because Jack Wasserman just kept putting it off. And as I understand it, you could just forever, you know, file motions and paperwork, and it would just forever keep it going. But he figured if I ever do get deported, I have business dealings in Guatemala. Supposedly, you know, he's a tomato salesman. He imported tomatoes. He did do that. A lot of it came from Guatemala, and he sold it to the Navy. That was one of his biggest customers, was the Navy, which is, you know, in Belchase and in Algiers. But he also imported weed from there, and he had shrimping interest in there. His uncle, I'm not sure if it was his real uncle, Felice Galino, who lived in Patterson, Louisiana, had shrimping boats there. Felice Galino went down and saw Carlos in Guatemala. There's a picture of them at a track, actually. in Guatemala while he was deported down there. But so yeah, Carlos figured if I ever do have to get deported, Guatemala is a lot closer than, say Sicily or Tunis, or there's France. And Bobby Kennedy hit all these countries up. Italy said no because he was born in French Tunisia. The French said no because that they no longer had that colony. The Tunisians said no because at the time he was born, it was a French colony. So nobody really. There's some theory that Carlos maybe worked some of that in his favor with contacts over there, but who really knows, But I would imagine his reputation as a mafioso didn't help. So